I can read it. You'll be. Okay.
The next agenda item is item number 4, the collaborative to deliver a presentation covering DBE progress with the City of New Orleans. I'm going to queue up the presentation form now.
Okay, great. And the presenters that I have listed on the agenda are Ms. Barbara Crane. Hey, Ms. Crane, how are you? Good to see you. Ms. Geneva Coleman, come on up. Ms. Deborah Gould, Mr. Stephen Kennedy, very well known to the City Council. Come on up, Mr. Kennedy, and Mr. Ernest Dahlberg. All of you all can come up to the table.
Stephen Video. Stephen? Yeah. No, stay there, but you need here. The one that's four, but let me borrow your pen real quick. You need one. Okay.
You know what? Get it afterwards.
Whenever you all are ready, whoever's leading can start. All right, Ms. Coleman, it's on you.
Just want to thank you so much, Councilwoman, for allowing us not only to present ourselves to you as a group, but for allowing us to be able to celebrate 10 years here in this council chambers where we actually began. We have a very presentation that is set up so that you can not only hear what we're about and what our aims are, but also to get a sense of what we're asking of our council. And I'm going to pass that baton to Ms. Barbara Major.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. Nobody else showed up yet? I remember them. When we talk about something that is certainly important in terms of the African-American women and other people of color community, and that is about economic development. We use the term disadvantaged business, and that term should be historically excluded businesses, because that's how we've gotten in this shape. And one of the things with the collaborative has been, how do we bring about equity in this city? Because it's possible not only in this city, but everywhere. And we have decided that policy, years ago, is like, not just me, but policy is like one of the first ways to do that. What we found out, though, is bringing about equity in New Orleans is like Brown versus Boyd, all immediate speed, and we still the most segregated, you know what I'm saying, in terms of education in this country, not just in New Orleans. So, and we've learned, though, because one of the things is step by step, there's no quick fix, and we get that. And I was excited to hear about Supply Diversity Office. I have some questions. I think it's a really good effort in terms of where they're going, and I appreciate your question. It's like, how many people monitoring these contracts? I mean, let's get for real here. The bottom line is we can have all the laws we want on the book, but if there's no compliance, there's no consequences, then it doesn't matter. And that has been the history of the city of New Orleans. I also have to lift up people historically who've helped us get this far. Diana Bourgeois, Cynthia Morrell, Jared Broussard, Brissette, and who, I'm trying to think of somebody else. Anyway, but they were there in times when, to understand where we were coming from. Cynthia Hedge Morrell, absolutely. And we've had some success, and that will be demonstrated in terms of the slideshow. But I also want to say that we've come for some asks. And those asks, Ernest, I know will go into more detail about them. But one is that we update our disparity study, because one of the things that we know that we cannot do certain policies or pass certain legislation unless we can prove that there is a disparity. We may know it in our hearts, but we also have to have the proof of it. that the charter change include a disparity study every 3 to 5 years. As the demographics and the economics change in this city, we need to be updated constantly about what's really going on, particularly with small, what's called minority-owned businesses or DBEs. That we look at 25% minority set aside. Now, folks say it can't be done, but it has been done, and it can be done. Having the political will to say, we're going to do this, doing the research that is required and necessary to say, we're going to do a 25% set aside. Because the bottom line, and we already know it, I don't play. So I'm going to call it like it is. If you don't mandate change, change will never happen in this city. And if you don't push forward with what some would call radical change, it will never, ever happen. So the 25% set aside. See, if I got to depend on the goodwill of big businesses, particularly big white businesses in this city, it will never happen. It has not happened, and it's not going to happen in the future unless we say this is the way it's going to be. The other one is that we support an increase in bonding assistance by LED and policies that actively create better access to working capital, such as the payment of mobilization funds. It's one thing to say the door is open. You can come in and you can be a protege, or you could even be a mentor. But if I don't have the money to sustain my business, then I can't be any of that. So I love all the language. It sounds really good, but I want to deal with reality in terms of what has happened and what we want to see happen in this city. And that this annual City of New Orleans DBE, that we have a scorecard. See, it's on the books that all these departments in the city supposed to come, when they bring their budget to you all, it's the law. When they bring their budget, they need to be able to show how much DBE business they've done. Now, we made a mistake by thinking that city leadership would be honorable. I knew better, but they didn't listen to me. Bottom line said 35%. Overall, now we know, and that's one thing I'm grateful to Jared Brissett for. Jared said, no, 35% in every department. There's been absolutely no monitoring. There's been absolutely no follow-up and absolutely no consequences of these city departments in terms of how they did their DBE. I'm going to end by saying a couple of things these ask, and there was another ask that I thought about. One is that people are paid promptly. They squeeze our small businesses to death by holding on to the money. And so there should be in the RFP prompt payment for small businesses. I don't care if you have to wait till, it doesn't make sense. You wait till the project's completed. When folk complete their businesses, they should be paid. If it takes 2 years to build a building, but Ernest, you go in there and you do your work in 3 months, you should be paid. You shouldn't have to wait till the prime is paid, and then you get paid God knows when. There should be deadlines and dates set on those contracts. I'm excited about the Supply and Diversity Office. I think it needs to be equipped better. However, you can put 1,000 folk in an office. If they don't understand the spirit and they don't understand no history of how this stuff is unfolded and not willing to take some risk and push it, it doesn't matter to me if you got 100 or you got 5 people in that office. So I want the office equipped. However, I want folk to understand the spirit in which we apply this law. I'm not talking about the garbage collector's mama being seen as a DBE. She's a white woman. Let's be real. Look, y'all, this is who I am. I'm calling it like I see it. That was not implemented in the spirit of this law. And I saw none of the leadership challenge it in this city. So, like I said, it doesn't surprise me. I want to read one letter that I've had.
Not yet.
I want to make sure. The other thing is not only the Supply and Diversity Office, there was another thing. I got a bunch of little notes here. The sequence of paying. I already talked about that in Supply and Diversity.
What about the LED? You talk about support for increased bonding assistance by LED.
That's good.
I'm going to give you more details.
Ernest is going to talk
Okay.
about that. Yes. That's it then for me.
Well, thank you, Ms. Barbara. And speaking of, absolutely. And speaking of history, as she just did, in the spirit of how we came together, we are a group of small business owners, and we are Black-owned businesses, male and female, and we came together for such a time as this. And indeed, we had the opportunity to come together based on not what has been happening most recently, but many years back. Our first encounter was with a call, much like a clarion call, to small and disadvantaged business owners in New Orleans to have a conversation about the billions of anticipated dollars in contract opportunities coming into this market, and several of us came. And as the conversations continued, everyone began to realize that there was a common thread interwoven among all of us, no matter the type or years in business. It was the lack of economic equity and parity, especially with procurement opportunities. You've all heard it stated and time again, and what some could probably call a cliche, that the national, state, and local economies rest on the shoulders of small businesses. Well, for us, and especially then, a major expectation, which was void of meaningful, consistent support, which we are here before you now, trying to make certain that you understand we need to continue the work here. So our mantra became, let's get economic equity and parity for all New Orleans small and DBE business owners. And now with one voice, this became our vision. And since we understood that vision without execution is nothing more than a hallucination, we focused our efforts on policy with a purpose, so that the rising tide of economic equity and parity and the sustained creation of wealth, which we have heard in many speeches on many platforms time and time again, and it can really lift all of us. Well, the one who made that call is the one who just spoke. Her name is Barbara Major. And those of us who answered the call are now known as the Collaborative. And we are proudly celebrating our 10th year anniversary, where we began with the City Council in support of our efforts. And that person also, who is sitting next to me, Barbara Major, has a letter that we would like to read to you, Councilwoman. Thank you.
I am pleased to extend my heartfelt congratulations to members of the Collaborative Organization on their 10th year anniversary of service to establish and maintain economic equity and parity regarding contract opportunities for New Orleans small minority businesses. Since February 2012, at a meeting called by Barbara Major, a relentless effort was launched by a group of minority business owners, now known as the Collaborative, to establish a sustainable foundation of policy measures that would successfully gain the needed support from the then New Orleans City Council and Mayor Mitch Landrieu. I trust that an even enhanced level of support will be extended now by our city officials to continue their work for equitable business opportunities going forward. To their credit, the Collaboratives have many accomplishments, starting with the unanimous passage of the overall 35% disadvantaged business enterprise, DBE goal, in 2013, funding to conduct the needed 2018 disparity study, and the unanimous passage of the recent ordinance in January 2021. This ordinance has now replaced the formal overall 35% goal to require compliance by all city agencies, departments, boards, and commissions to independently meet the 35% DBE goal. I have had the pleasure of working with the Collaborative during the course of my political career on both the state and federal levels, and I commend their consistency of mission, message, and methods. There is no doubt that there is much more to come from this policy-driven and policy-savvy group of Black business owners who believe that positive change happens when everyone stands together for equity. I salute and congratulate members of the collaborative and truly look forward to the next 10 years of their service to our community. Sincerely, Representative Troy A. Carter, Sr., United States Congressman, Louisiana's 2nd Congressional District. Thank y'all, collaborative.
Deborah.
Thank you, Geneva and Barbara. I am Deborah Washington Gould, founding member of the Collaborative and president and CEO of Deborah Gould and Associate, Inc., a performance management firm in professional services. As you can see by this slide that is up now, of the collaborative accomplishments, along with allies on the City Council and in the Office of Supplier Diversity. The collaborative spent its first several years working to establish the basic elements of effective DBE policy and law for the City of New Orleans. These fundamentals included a legally mandated DBE program, a 35% DBE applied to all city contracts, good faith requirements for prime contractors, and penalties for non-compliance. Annual DBE reporting requirements by all city departments, agencies, and attached and unattached boards, commissions, and corporations that utilize public funding or incentives. We are the collaborative and proud of our successes, not for ourselves, but for the DBEs in the future who will experience a more transparent and equitable contracting process. The next slide, please. So, what needs to happen so that this level of success can be maintained? As you well know, the most progressive policies and laws on paper is absolutely just words on paper. Absolutely no good, worthless, and useless if they are not enforced. The collaborative has previously come before the City Council to advocate for the full funding and staffing of the Office of Supplier Diversity. Once again, we are happy to report that funding was increased during a critical time, but we would ask the City Council to monitor and makes it a priority every year. As we note on this slide, DBE laws are supposed to help small minority businesses gain experience, build capacity, access partnerships, markets, and products they would otherwise be shut out of. But there has unfortunately been a lack of consistency in the application of the DBE policies. Case in point, despite the $1 billion+ budget, the construction at the North Terminal at Louis Armstrong New Orleans International Airport fell short of its goal its overall DBE goal by 30% with no apparent penalty. Another example of the lack of inclusion for DBEs occurred when the city agreed to meet quarterly with a group of prime contractors to inform and prepare them for upcoming FEMA-funded contracts. Somebody in this building forgot about the DBEs. They did not extend that courtesy to DBEs. As a result of this lack of communication, local small minority businesses did not have ample time to establish resources to compete for contracting opportunities. The expectation of additional federal dollars through the Build Back Better legislation dictates, y'all, the time is right now, the time to set in place that ensures inclusion and equitable opportunities for our city's DBEs. A final note. As this council has already demonstrated a willingness to enforce DBE's policies where possible, if I can just ask all of the collaborative members to please rise, and any other minority businesses in this chamber to just stand for a moment so you can see the faces of these business owners. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated. So this is our big ask and our hope, to see full DBE reporting from every city department, agency, board, and commission this year. And for the council to hold entities accountable for non-compliance. I am Deborah Washington Gould. Thank you for the privilege and value of your time this afternoon. And I now will yield to Stephen Kennedy to discuss the disparity study.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you once again, Councilmember Moreno, for having us here today. As you have heard previously, in 2017, the collaborative, we advocated to the council and the mayor at that time to have a disparity study performed based on our research and feedback from some legal scholars, and knowing that in order to have a disadvantaged business enterprise program in place, you basically had to have a study performed based on the United States Supreme Court Croson decision. The Supreme Court noted that government cannot be a passive participant in discrimination, and that a program would have to be narrowly tailored in order to address disparities found based on data collected over a certain period of time. The study was performed by King Independent Research, a Denver-based company that conducted the study for the city of New Orleans. King had also conducted 30 disparity studies across the country, and most recently completing studies in Baton Rouge and Shreveport. The disparity study performed in 2018 it basically looked at the time frame from 2012 to 2016, and there's a little bit over 500 pages, though many of my colleagues put together a rough synopsis of that 500-page report and is available upon request. Next slide, please. The study at the time it was performed showed that there were disparities in city contracting. The study looked back in time because in order to have a program, you have to go back in time to show disparities exist. And so, as I mentioned previously in the previous slide, it looked at the time frame from 2012 to 2016. The study showed that there was disparities in both professional services, goods, and construction, with construction constituting the largest and most consistent source of city contracts. I would like to reference 2 points discussed in that study that should be noted. The number of qualified DBE businesses are sufficient to perform work if provided with the right opportunities to compete. And secondly, and a sufficient number of DBEs are available to reduce the use of waivers that sometimes take place on procurement opportunities. Next slide, please. The disparity study recommendations implemented as of today that was mentioned by Ms. Bartholomew, which is good, which we help engage with that office, which helps create the renaming of the program to the Equitable Business Opportunity Program. And I also want to thank Council Member Moreno when she traveled with me to Atlanta a couple of years back to hear what they was doing in Atlanta to increase participation for minority and women-owned businesses in the city of Atlanta. Also, the recommendation that was implemented by the Office of Supply Diversity was a centralized, unified SLDB certification was created amongst entities such as the cities, Harris, Sewage and Water Board, and the Louis Armstrong International Airport. While the centralized certification is important in its implementation, there are still vital recommendation steps needed that will help grow the economy of our city and help build the capacity of minority businesses, as you will hear from my fellow collaborative member, Mr. Ernest Stolbert.
Thank you. My name is Ernest Stolbert, and this is really where the rubber meets the road. I'm going to be brief, but I'm going to be thorough. But I also want you to understand why we're making these requests. We have 5 requests that we're making. The justification, when you look at today's landscape, despite millions of dollars spent on Hurricane Katrina recovery projects, millions of dollars spent on new schools, new roads, millions of dollars spent on new streets, new office buildings, a new airport, despite all this federal spending and local spending, minorities and African American businesses are not making significant progress towards growing their country, or their companies rather, and generating sustainable wealth. And I say sustainable wealth because that's really what we're trying to achieve. Many of the DBEs get a contract here and a contract there, but to be able to sustain your company, to sustain your labor force, and to sustain your business, you need consistent business. I want to point out one item on the 2018 disparity study, which states that 68% of the city contracts, the 2018 disparity study stated this, went to majority white firms. Even worse, that disparity study stated that 98% of private contracting went to white firms. What does that leave the minority contractors in this city and the minority business in this city? Well, it leaves us fighting over 32% of city business and 2% of private contracts. For that reason, it is our opinion that we are effectively locked out of the private market. We are desperately in need and request support on these next 5 initiatives, which are: number 1, we need an updated disparity study. It was done in 2018. We're asking for a 2022 or at worst case a 2023 disparity study. Item number 2 is equally important. We should not have to come to the council and to the city of New Orleans every year begging for disparity studies. It should be in the city charter. It should be done automatically. I want to remind all the members here and all the public that prior to the 2018 disparity study, we had not had a study done for 20 years prior to that. We cannot continue to make those mistakes. We cannot continue not to measure the progress or the lack of progress with regard to the minority spending and minority business in this city. Number 3 is very, very important. The collaborative had made best practice recommendations many, many years ago, and we were only told that certain things could not be done. We're requesting 25% minority or DBE set aside for the city of New Orleans. We were told it couldn't be done. Stephen Kennedy and I researched the state constitution, and it says set-asides are allowed if the Louisiana legislature approved it. Lo and behold, House Bill 457 was approved for Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge has a 25% minority set-aside to this day. And this is really important. It was passed unanimously. So all the forces that objected to it in the past, all of a sudden, unanimously say we support a set-aside. We suspect the reason is there's federal dollars coming down with the infrastructure program. These dollars require these things to be in place. So we're asking the city of New Orleans, the city council, to pass a 25% minority set-aside program for the city of New Orleans. To assist with that, there's a copy of the Baton Rouge legislation in your packet. So we don't have to rewrite the rules. We've given it to you. It's right there. We need to spruce it up and get someone to champion that and get a set-aside passed in the city of New Orleans. Secondly to that, I want to say that there's already a set-aside in the city of New Orleans. The convention center has a set-aside for the convention center, which was passed and approved by the legislature. So why doesn't the city of New Orleans have the same? Why isn't there a push and a rallying cry in this city and in this administration for the same? If you're in support of minority businesses, that is the quickest way to help these businesses get started and to sustain their businesses. Number 4, support the increase in bonding assistance by the Louisiana Economic Development Association. We have asked the governor of Louisiana, and we met with his assistant, Ms. Brenda Geis, just a few weeks ago, and asked that they increase the bonding assistance program in the LEDs program. We, as small businesses, are relegated to subcontractors in every facet of the business if we don't have bonding. So when we say we're trying to help small businesses, but they don't have bonds, they can't even bid on a contract. They now are permanent subcontractors. Permanent subcontractors. You can't build a second and third generation being a permanent subcontractor. We need our businesses to become primes, and that's a key point in making us and helping us to get there. And lastly, the annual City of New Orleans DBE scorecard is something that we see other cities do, other progressive cities, other cities that are serious about DBE and minority participation. They score each department and how well they're doing. Our current system is not effective enough. They theoretically report just around budget time what their DB percentages are. There's no scoring of it. We don't know if it's good, if it's bad. We don't know the overall budget. And my understanding is many departments still have not produced these reports. My opinion is that if they don't produce a report of DBE spending, they should not get their budget approved. So these things are the things that we're asking the city council, and we're asking of the administration as well. And we think it is very, very important that you be intentional in our efforts. We will not undo 200 and 300 years worth of racist economic policies by not being intentional. You can't do it by and by. You can't do it with wishful thinking. You can't do it because your heart's right. You have to be intentional in doing it. So these are the things that we're asking the city council to do that's under their purview, and to support those things that are not under their purview. And we request it as soon as possible. In concluding, I would like to thank Helena Moreno and your staff for giving us this opportunity and for working with us with the City Council Working Group. And I'm asking all of the city councilmen, those who are not here and those who are here, to really take this seriously, because we're going to be pushing for it very, very hard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council Member. Are there any questions that you might have of any of us?
I have some questions. I also wanted to mention that Councilmember Green is now in attendance with us for those who may be watching at home. So the 5 action items, and first let me just say thank you to the collaborative, to the leadership of the collaborative and also the membership of the collaborative, because you all have assisted me so much since I've been on the city council and kind of moving forward the policies that you all have brought before me and kind of what are the best practices that we need to be moving forward. Stephen mentioned our trip to Atlanta. We learned a lot and brought some of that good information back home as well. So once again, just very appreciative of the work that you do and how you work so closely with the council. So, I'm someone that likes to figure out a path to get things done. So if you don't mind, I'd like to walk through your action items. So first and I'm glad Ms. Bartholomew is still here with us so that I can bring her into this conversation as well. For the disparity study, are there any specific action items that the council needs to take, or can the Office of Supplier Diversity just move forward with procuring a consultant to move forward with a disparity study?
Funding.
Okay, so the funding piece, how much did the Keene study cost?
The Keene study was $500,000, but as you know, when studies are done, you just basically updating the study. So we don't anticipate the study costing $500,000 every time a study is done, because what they'll be doing is extracting previous collected data and just updating that information. So I don't think it would cost $500,000 every time a study is needed going forward.
But a set aside then of $500,000 would be more than sufficient then.
Yes.
Yes.
And so with that, Ms. Bartholomew, is your office in support of moving forward as expeditiously as possible with another disparity study? Hang on, if you can come to the mic, please.
There's one on the end of her.
You got to come on the back.
As I get older, I'm having trouble hearing, I'm having trouble seeing, so.
So yes, we are prepared to move forward if we get funding for it.
Okay.
Yes.
All right,
We're in
well.
support of it.
Okay, so let the council work on that particular piece. If we have your commitment that you would expeditiously move forward with that, the council can certainly work on the funding piece. On the action item number 2, 2022 charter change to include disparity studies every 3 to 4 years. My question is, can this be satisfied with an ordinance requiring a disparity study every 3 to 4 years? Still a law, and it can be passed in, relatively
The answer is
short
yes.
amount of time.
The answer is
Yes,
yes.
definitely.
Okay, that answers my question. So that's something that the council can work on as well. And that's the thing, 'cause we would have to put it on the ballot. It goes before a vote. But if we did an ordinance, that can be a relatively quick process. If we can all get together on figuring out that language and figuring out what that looks like, I'd love to work with you all on getting that piece done. Okay, on action item number 3, 25% minority DBE set aside for the city of New Orleans based on Louisiana House Bill 457, which authorized a 25% DBE set aside for Baton Rouge. So it appears to me in reading the legislation, Mr. Kennedy, I'm going to toss it over to you if I'm saying something incorrectly. It looks like the legislature needs to first authorize the city of New Orleans to move forward with this set aside. Is that so? We need state legislative action first?
No. So what happened with HB 457 by Representative Carpenter in Baton Rouge is that once they completed their disparity study, Mayor Broom actually approached Representative Carpenter to do the set aside, and Representative Carpenter carried a bill in the legislature, which Ernest alluded to, passed unanimous throughout the House and unanimous throughout the Senate. And I think the governor did sign that bill, and now it's an act now. And so that's how the set aside was created for Baton Rouge. Representative Carpenter basically went.
Right. But what I'm saying is we need an act in Baton Rouge.
So what will need to be done, in my humble opinion, is that the administration and the council, you all can go and ask one of our local Orleans delegation.
Oh, no problem. No, I got that. Like, no, we'll find an author.
Yeah.
We'll figure out who's going to be the author for the legislation. But what I'm saying is it doesn't seem like this is something that the council on its own could do.
Oh, yeah, correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
gotcha,
That's correct.
gotcha,
Yeah,
gotcha.
because what Mr. Stallbird alluded to earlier is that anytime a municipality based on a Croson decision, it have to be created through legislation.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that, and let's work together and figure out an author. You know, we can connect with members of the New Orleans delegation. I'm sure you all have many contacts with them as well, and find the right person who could lead this for us in Baton Rouge. And I'm happy to, you know, help support and help whoever decides to carry this for you all and really for the city.
Question?
Yeah, hang on. Let me just get to the last action item. I just, you know, I like to be specific on things, on how we're going to move forward. I'm sorry, Councilmember Green. I'm almost done. So on the annual City of New Orleans DBE scorecard rating each department, agency, board, commission, city established corporation, and project using city funds. I'm looking at the one that, and thank you for submitting this into the record, the New York City report card. And I mean, this seems something that is like a no-brainer. You know, I mean, I think with this, I'd like for you all to work with Sadie on my team. We can start putting together an ordinance on this to create these report cards. I mean, this is just good public-facing data. I think it's really important data that the city council needs. This is something that actually Freddie King has brought to my attention, that he's very interested in understanding what's happening within each city agency, what's happening with the different boards and commissions. So I think that this is something that'll help on the accountability side as well. So let's, you know, you already know Sadie Geneva very well, as you've worked with her, and so does Stephen Kennedy. So if you all can get together on item number 5, item number 2, because those will both require legislation. And then on item number 4, which is supporting bonding assistance by LED, and I see that you are hoping to get that raised from, I think it's double the amount that it is now.
250 or more.
Yeah, which is because Jindal reduced it, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and so we want it back to what it used to be. I'm more than happy to write a letter of support and ask all council members to sign that as well and send that to the governor.
Thank you so much for that.
One other thing, Councilmember Moreno, that I don't want to get lost. When we talk about access to capital, we just not talking about bonding. We talking about access to capital for us, working capital, access to capital for this growth capital, just access to capital, period, because most of our members and most of the DB community, everybody are not contractors. Some folks have goods companies. Some folks say electrical professional services. So when we talk about access to capital, we talking about it globally instead of just focus specifically on bonding.
Yep. It's a good point. Thank you, Stephen. All right, Councilmember Green.
Yes, thank you all for being here today. I regret that I have to be so late. The Urban League had an event today, and this is a rescheduled meeting, so it was already on my calendar, but I'm glad to be here. I want to thank the collaborative also, and also those who recognize how important participation is by minority businesses if our economy is going to grow. We've seen successes in other cities, and we'd like to duplicate some of those successes and repeat some of those successes here in New Orleans. We recognize that certainly one of the problems that we have in our city is lack of access to public and private sector economic development opportunities, business opportunities. So to the extent that we can help out as a city, we certainly will do so. And I appreciate your attentiveness to the details in terms of asking us for specifics. And I too don't see any problems or concern with anything here, and will support and work with Councilmember Moreno, her staff, my staff, and also the members of this committee. I had one specific question before I move on. Was there a need, based on the Croson decision, to have Louisiana pass a law allowing for this, or is there something in the state constitution that prohibits a set-aside? In other words, why did the state have to address it? In other words, why couldn't I just do an ordinance on a city level? Does Croson prohibit that?
Yeah, so because of, based on the Keene study, Article 1, Section 3 of the Louisiana Constitution basically says you can't have discrimination in any capacity. And as you all know, when the Louisiana Constitution was changed in 1972, that's when that language was added. And so what that language basically kind of rubber stamped is that you can't change discrimination. Well, however, the Croson decision based out of Virginia, the Supreme Court wanted to basically say the only way you can have a program to adjust disparities, you have to do a disparity study to show discrimination actually exists. And so basically, since New Orleans can't write the Constitution, that's why we have to take a legislative approach and go into the state capital to be able to get legislation passed for New Orleans to have a set-aside specifically for the municipality. Because in Baton Rouge, that set-aside program is specific only to Baton Rouge. Right. It's not specific to the state of Louisiana.
Okay, and I would strongly support it, but it's something, even with DBE, it's not race or gender.
DBE is race and gender neutral.
That's what I'm saying.
Set-aside programs are specifically towards individual groups that are experiencing disparities.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So if you, for instance, if you have women wasn't getting no contracting opportunity, you can have a set-aside program specifically for women businesses. Not to give them contracts, but allow women businesses to compete against each other. So this is not somebody getting handed a contract.
Right,
it just creating a pool of folks who have this experience discrimination to be able to compete for procurement opportunities.
Right, and the only reason I'm asking is because if there was some way that we could do it through an ordinance where we wouldn't have to wait until all the way next year to do it, because of course we don't have a session until next year, and since it's DBE and it's technically race and gender neutral, but I'll follow and I'll look more closely at what was done with House Bill 457.
And Councilman, would you, I can't remember, Stephen, is it Department of Transportation that allows
they have a set-aside.
Yeah, they have a set-aside. So looking at, because I was able to do that at RTA. Yes. And even in terms of looking at, and I don't know if that would be the Office of Supply Diversity, to look at creative ways of providing access to capital, to working capital, because it was more than bonding. But one of the things that we created was my working with the banks to say to the banks, if you were willing to upfront the money to my small businesses and DBEs, then what RTA would do is you get your money off the top when they get paid with the contract. We call it the fair share. But that was Department of Transportation money and gave a lot more flexibility. But they have it, and so I don't know if we can look at it and see how it can be duplicated, but how can we look at accessing more capital beyond just the bonding? Because even if you're doing contract, these folk making billions of dollars in my city, so I don't see why they can't put up working capital. You know, it's one thing you want to be my mentor, you know what I'm saying? I need some money. Mm-hmm. So you want to be my mentor, we've just got to, I don't know how else to say it, but sometimes I don't think we've stronghold these big boys coming in here making all this money in a legal way to ensure that our own people, whether you black, white, whatever, our own people in New Orleans have access to also making some of that money. So some kind of way start thinking out of the box in ways that we can do it legitimately. However, to grow our own city, and we've not done that previously in this city.
Right, I agree with you. I'd like to look at public bid law one day, the state public bid law, because sometimes the issue is that you're constrained so much by low bid wins, and I understand why you do that sometimes, but that's not necessarily in the best interest of society and making the society better. So a lot of things to look at, but I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Councilman.
Could I say something?
Yes.
In the public bid law, it specifically says that set-asides in Louisiana is allowable, but through the legislature. So basically, they're saying it's okay if the legislature approve it. So we need a legislative push to get this done specifically now because the federal dollars are at hand. Once these dollars go away, they may not have the same incentives to say yes to a set-aside.
And if I may, Councilmember Green and Moreno, something that Ms. Barber stated, she was an excellent chairwoman when she was at RTA, and I love her so much because she really kind of got me involved in a lot of the work that I do for this around economic empowerment. But also under President Biden, under the American Rescue Plan, they basically reenacted the state small business credit initiative. And so the state of Louisiana is getting roughly $74 million, but up to possibly $100 million. And in those state small business credit initiative, Louisiana Economic Development Corporation, which is a body under the Louisiana Economic Development Department, will be using a lot of those funds to create a collateral support program, also to create direct access to loans, And that was also the initial funds when they created the bonding program in, I guess, 2010, when President Obama was in office. That's when the State Small Business Credit Initiative program was created. So that's where the previous administration used those funds to be able to create the bonding program. So hopefully LEDC can make sure that minority and women-owned businesses, because even in there, they say they're going to focus on social, economically challenged businesses who are going to be able to get a lot of access to that capital. And that's one thing I like to commend President Biden and his administration for focus and being intentional about saying that access to capital is going to go to those businesses that we know have been struggling to access capital for many, many generations.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all. Thank
All right, hang on, y'all. We got some public comment. Okay, William Lewis, followed by Edward Parker. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. Marino and Ms. Green, Council, and our.
Close to it.
Just put the mic a little closer to you. There you go.
Okay, thank you. And I rose for two things in particular. One was to thank you for having us. And the second thing is to encourage you to support the collaborative agenda. And what I wanted to speak to in particular is the community, because there's a perception that this is all about black business, but it's about crime in the community. It's about young people having jobs that could help with crime in the community. Recently, the concern about crime was so much they formed what they call a NOLA coalition. You might have seen that. And if you look at their agenda or platform, they concentrate on preparation of young folks, getting them ready for jobs. They're going to put money there. And they're going to put money in policing and increases in retention. But the process to keep crime down is employment for that group that's committing the crimes. And who generally hire young people or people that's willing to take on the expense of training them, on-job training, and so forth. Now, in the past, when they were tearing down the housings at some of the public units, they had, that was Hano, and they had a requirement for the contractors to either hire some of the residents of the complex or pay a 5% penalty toward training. And most and all, and I talked to a couple, I said, what about the training? They said, no, we're going to contribute to 5%. Because the 5% is cheaper than bringing on young, unskilled people. Even though there are preparation training in the classroom, social skills, etc., there's no one, at least in business, they are not committed to taking on that responsibility. Who takes on that responsibilities are local people take on local employment, local minority blacks concentrate and are more, let's say,
Start to wrap up, Mr.
helping
Lewis.
minorities and blacks.
Start to wrap up.
Okay, so the point is the collaborative objective is a community objective of reducing crime through employment by helping minority businesses hire young minority people.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you.
Edward Parker, followed by I am Christian Tucker.
Good morning.
All right.
Man, what a great report. Thank you, collaborative members. Okay. New Orleans is the gold mine of the state. We all know that. As New Orleans goes, so goes the state. We've heard that so many times. What we're trying to do is slay this elephant in the room. and that is the lack of black economic opportunity in this city. This is what this whole presentation is about. So please, this is a scaled down study of that disparity study, and there are best practices in this. Please, Council, take this study and look at what the facts are and help equitable economic opportunities for blacks in this city be a reality. One more ask. I don't know if anyone listened to BOK yesterday, but Troy Henry was on. And he mentioned that he was having problems with his project because the city was dragging their feet. And I was asked by one of because I called in, and I was asked to mention that today. Please, council people, take a look at what's going on with that Bayou Phoenix project and Troy having problems, even getting on site. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for mentioning that. As you know, the City Council has no role in that in contracting and on that project, but myself and Councilmember Green will be seeing representatives from the CAO office later this afternoon, and that's something that we can mention to them. Thank you. Ms. Tucker, come on up, and followed by Archivia Matthews.
Hi, thank you
afternoon.
for the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Collaborative Leadership, for your report, and thank y'all for listening to it. Actually, your last comment segues into directly what I wanted to speak about. I'm glad to hear you're going to be at the CAO's office today, because I wanted to talk about briefly, and all this good, we have to talk about real situations, and that's to talk about their failure of the CAO's office on the garbage contracts. There were many qualified DBEs that have worked in QA/QC, construction management, all these different facets of qualified work. And to be as a member of one of those teams and somebody that was excited to compete and knew the weaknesses of other teams at the time, it was more than disappointing to see the team that won and what was allowed to pass for a DBE. The Office of Supplier Diversity can only do what they do when they say that somebody has met the minimum qualifications of being a part of an RFQ. But minimum qualifications are just that. They're minimum qualifications. These people checked enough boxes and played enough games with the system in order to become qualified. They had no past performance. Their past performance was event rental, and the prime contractor on that opportunity had complete control over that DBE, and still does. And so the DBE office can come to the table, they can voice what they do, they can say they've met the minimum qualifications, but they have no voting voice on the panel. And so while the people inside of the CAO's office, and I was a supporter of this administration, still am, but the CAO's office has talked a good talk, but they failed us and did not meet the rubber did not meet the road where it mattered. That opportunity would have meant growth in services, growth in revenues, and growth in the same people that the person that was just up here was talking about, creating opportunity. And so I'm glad that you're having those conversations. I hope that you'll bring that to it. We need to continue to empower the Office of Supplier Diversity to do what they do, to be able to follow compliance. And if we don't stop some of these RFPs in their tracks, I know how important garbage collection is. Mine hasn't been collected in a week. So, but at the same time, I'd rather pause things, because that sends a message to prime contractors to let the city of New Orleans know we're not playing. That resonates. That's the only thing that resonates, is being stopped in their tracks. So thank you again for paying attention. Thank you, collaborative members, and thank y'all for being here.
Thank you, Ms. Tucker. Archivia Matthews, followed by, I'm having trouble reading this because I don't have my glasses. What does that say?
Fashion Ben. No, Eugene Ben.
Doesn't really say Eugene. It's
Yes,
okay.
Eugene, yeah.
All right. Archivia, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Council Member, for really recognizing and acknowledging the collaborative for their 10-year founding. That's very special, and congratulations, y'all. 10 years. 10 years, congratulations. As I just want to share a really brief story. As a very much so freshman in city government, and newly appointed interim director of the Office of Supplier Diversity, I received a letter complete with a picture of a massive group of Black leaders, business owners, and advocates standing on the steps of the Louisiana Supreme Court. It was in this moment that my spirit said, it's time to lead, follow, or get out of the way. And I am so grateful for the beacons of light that was there to assist me and guide me. People like Ms. Barbara Crane Major, Ms. Geneva Coleman, Ms. Judith Dangerfield, Ms. Deborah Gould, Mr. Ernest. I can't forget our fallen heroes like Mr. Lonnie Hewitt, Mr. Joseph Gould. And I will not forget the young lions who are continuing to roar like Stephen and I am, and Jessica and all of y'all. Congratulations again, and thank you for continuing to be an organization that holds our leaders accountable, because an ordinance and a policy is just words if the work is not done. So here's to 10 more years of doing the work to assure equity throughout the city of New Orleans. Congratulations again.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. And the last one is Mr. Ben.
Good morning, collaborative, and thank you all, my friends. Thank you all, my friends from the collaborative who are here to support us today. Thank you to my friend, Ms. Barbara Major, who introduced me to this great project that continues to roll, and all the people in the front row here. The question I wanted to ask, and I'm glad that Ms. Balthasar reminded me, and it was a question that I have been churning over in my mind for many years. And someone said it. We are, like, you know, I'm originally from New York. I came here with FEMA, and I love this city. I left New York, packed my things, and I'm still here. I love this city. OSD, you are the eyes of small business in the city. You are the ones that basically see what happens to us and what we need to do to relieve the desperation that small businesses who are aligned and articled in the city of New Orleans want for us to be successful. For so many other people who depend on us, who want to see us prosper. And the apertures need to be open for those doors that are locked shut in terms of opportunity for small business in the city of New Orleans. The question I needed to ask is, who is monitoring the millions of dollars in capital projects that are basically even on the ground now as we sit here at this meeting, that do not have their apertures open to small business? And one gets tired when you go to these meetings. Actually, there's one happening in the back of my house, H3C. When people say there's contractors coming to the city, and you see all the plates from there are from Texas. They're not from people who live here who are working on these projects. And the first question you asked is, what is your DBE participation? Oh, well, we can't find anybody. Well, what about OSD? Let me give you a number. Maybe you could call them and get this particular information to a lot of contractors here who are hungry for the work. And this continues to go on. And this is just one project of the many that basically on the ground, some that we are able to see, some that are hidden from the process, from us being participants in the city. And so we at this particular forum continue to ask you, those of you, you know, and I'm not trying to be rude to anyone, but I see my friend Eugene here, when we have a relationship. I see Ms. Moreno here, we have a relationship. But I know there are other council members who I would have liked to see here, because most of the people in this particular forum represent those 5 different neighborhoods. And so we would have liked these people to also be not only have the supplication to listen to the voices of the people out here for what we continue to say. We can have so many disparity studies, but until people on the Diaz over here begin to manifest the dreams that we have, that we continue to follow, these things are going to remain stagnant and remain the same. So we ask for you to listen to the voices of people here who continue to cry and sing this sulfur every year, every moment, every minute, that we need opportunity, but we need you to stand on the front lines for us to fight for this opportunity and what we stand for. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Ben. Any public comments online, Yulby?
No, we'll just read the remaining online comment. We'll post it on the web.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. All right. So with that, that completes the presentation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you
Obviously,
very
we have
much.
some work to do.
Yep.
Ms. Coleman, you want to be the point again, working with Sadie and my team on the. Okay, perfect. That sounds good. And Stephen, you know how to reach us as well. So let's just, we've got a couple of ordinance to work on, and let's get rolling on those.
We
Thank
thank
y'all.
you for helping us celebrate
welcome.
our 10th year. Thank you.
Oh, wait, I forgot. Wait. I forgot. Are y'all available on the 18th for our council meeting? Because the council had a little something for you all, for the collaborative.
The answer
You all
is
can
yes.
come? Okay.
The answer is yes.
If you
Yep,
can
yeah.
come, yeah. So we'll send you details about that, but just mark your calendars, for the 18th for that council meeting, okay? To celebrate your 10 years. Thank you. All right.
you all.
So with that, with nothing else on the agenda, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you.
Hey, Deborah.